obviously the first thing everyone does when I was in high school is you watch UFC. So my friend says, hey, there's this Brazilian guy who wears a gi or he wears a kimono or whatever karate outfit and he's beating the shit out of everyone. We all watch it together and think, need to practice this stuff. So we're all wrestling on the ground trying to figure out this jiu-jitsu thing. We thought when you put someone in your guard, you squeeze them really tight with your legs, and that's what he must be doing. So we're full into that. And then what happened was I started kickboxing. And then maybe 2-3 months into that, I booked myself an MMA fight. I hadn't done any grappling before. I just figured it would be a great idea because I watched it on TV. So my friend who was a white belt at the time decided in his lounge he would give me a lesson on how to do triangles and a basic, I think it was maybe a sweep from full guard. So I rocked up to VT1 after doing, I think, 2 lounge room sessions and told Liam, the owner, I said, look, I've got a fight booked for next weekend for 2 weeks' time. And he's like, okay, where you been training? I was like, oh, I haven't been training. He's like, okay, so like, what's your plan? Like, how are you going to get your training in order for the fight? I was like, well, that's why I'm here. He's like, you do realize 2 weeks isn't enough to get you ready. I was like, nah, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. He's like, you sure? I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. Thank God the event fell through. Thank God. So I did 3 jiu-jitsu classes and went in a jiu-jitsu competition that weekend instead. And I got obliterated. I got subbed in the first minute. And then after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this jiu-jitsu stuff. And that's what started, actually.
I was waiting for Liam to say, so who's your coach? And you're like, just a mate. Like,
yeah, he's landing a white belt.
Right. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, but you have had, obviously, an MMA fight since then. Obviously, that got cancelled. Like, was it all that you thought it would be cracked out to be? So, like, obviously, you know, people always go in. And I guess even with your friend, right? Like, we always have these people, I guess, that have got that advice and this and that. But, like, it's just different. Once you actually step in there, it's different. I mean, I would even say with the whole Paige Van Zandt experience, right? Like she was talking about like potentially getting hit by shins and kicks, you know, when people were asking her like, have you ever been punched by bare knuckles? And she's like, well, I've been hit by shins and stuff. But I felt like that first fight she had, she was kind of a little lost until the last round, right? And I feel like it was a case of that she was getting hit with stuff she hadn't been hit before. And it took her, I guess, the first 4 rounds to really kind of understand like, okay, this is what it is now. So going back to your first experience, was it what you thought it would be? What were kind of some of the thoughts going into it? And yeah, as I say, what was your first kind of 30 seconds like?
Yeah, look, I think on that topic with Paige, if you look at, you can't be, even if you're a great boxer, if you fight a bare knuckle boxer who's only bare knuckle box, you're going to have a lot of trouble with him. Look at Artem Lobov, who's fought in all his little gloves, versus Paulie Malignaggi, who is a world champion in professional boxing. And the thing, Artem beats him. Like it doesn't work that strictly. So when I've competed, obviously fencing for 10 years, and I did boxing fights, kickboxing fights, jiu-jitsu, and I figured it would all marry together and it would just come out. It doesn't. MMA is its own thing completely. The mindset when you're in there is a lot more aggressive than I have in any of the other disciplines, particularly jiu-jitsu and boxing. I try to be very calm. MMA, I felt very aggressive, almost like in danger in there. So I needed to be the alpha in there, which I've never really had that as much in combat sports. There was also that fear of when the punches started throwing of how small the gloves really were. I really got a sense when he hit me with the first one. So the fight started was I opened with a head kick, but I kicked him in the neck, so it was a bit too low. He chased me. I caught his kick. I dropped him with the right hand, and I got on top trying to consolidate the position. And he started hammer fisting me really hard in the side and actually the back of the head. And he hammer fisted me so hard in the back of the head, I almost went out in his guard. So when I orientated myself, you'll see in the video if you ever watch it on YouTube, I stopped for a
I've seen it. I've watched it.
It takes me like a few seconds to be like, where am I? And then I realized in that moment, I don't want him hitting me ever again with those little gloves. And then from then on, I did everything I could to make sure he didn't fucking touch me for the next 2 rounds. But it was a feeling of survival in there. I never felt that in anything I've ever competed in. But once I felt like, man, one shot, he could put me out, I started to go to, there's no room for mistake going on, like from here on in. And it just changed me to super aggressor, which I'm normally not in fights.
See, I can totally agree because when I jumped in, it was the same thing, right? Like we're talking about survival mode. When people always ask what the experience was like, I mean, mine was totally different in the sense of that I went in there, I always say I wanted to touch gloves and I wanted to dance a little bit, right? And obviously my opponent had a different a different strategy. He was like, yeah, we'll touch gloves, but I'm going to throw straight after, right? And he's literally like clocked me one. And the sensation I got out of that was literally, I felt like I always say it was like a vacuum. And even to the point, like, I didn't even know ref was in there anymore. It was like literally a kind of like white padded walls for me. Yeah. And it was me and him. That's it. Yeah. Like I don't remember anything else. Yeah. The crowd was gone. Everything was, and that's what I talk about survival mode. It was like literally I'd been clocked that hard, probably concussed. I don't know. Yeah. But it was like literally all my senses disappeared apart from my eyes. That's it. Like I just like everything else wasn't even there anymore. Right. And it wasn't until I submitted him with the anaconda, which will impress you, I guess. But it wasn't until then, and the ref pulling me off him, that then all of a sudden, like the crowd cheering and stuff came back like a tidal wave. It was like a slow, right? And it was, but like for that, you know, I won't say split second, it was really like, I go, this must be like what survival mode is, right? Like you're literally in this zone that.
Yeah, you just immediately hone out anything that doesn't assist your immediate needs. Your immediate needs is to focus on the individual in front of you, so your mind just blocks out anything else that's not relevant at the time. The only reason I definitely knew the ref was there was because he was in my ear calling me a lot of really bad names, and at one time I thought he was going to bite my ear because I was in his full guard and he's screaming in my ear calling me a coward and a bitch. He's out telling me to be a man and do all this stuff. Like, it was pretty bad. So I looked up at the ref and I was like, are you going to do something about this? Because I honestly, he was growling in my ears. So I thought he was going to bite me. And I thought, what a weird turn that would be. So I only knew the ref was there because I was kind of trying to like see if he was going to stop the guy trying to abuse me for whatever reason. I think he was getting upset that it was on the ground, that I wasn't standing back up, and he was trying to taunt me into standing back up. But the way we got to the ground was I punched him in the face and he fell on his back. It's not like I took him down. So I didn't really get that plan of his, but it was a very odd experience for a fight.
Plus for you also, being a black belt, you're probably more comfortable on the ground anyway, right?
To be honest, I felt comfortable everywhere in that fight. I really had it in my mind that I wanted to submit him because I'd done so many striking fights. It was my intention of that fight was to go in there, submit. I even said it in the post-fight interview. That's what I wanted to do. That was my goal. I think it was good of him to take that fight in the first place. And I kind of had it in my mind. Like, he had 9 fights. I had 0 fights. But I didn't want to knock him out. I know it sounds bad, but at the time I was competing pure jits and I wasn't even sparring at all, any striking, because I was in this phase where I wasn't really happy with punching people in the face. So I had the Damian Maia mentality in that fight that I wanted to try finish it with doing as little damage to him as possible, actually. So the idea was always to choke him from the start.